I was a piano player, Ben was a guitar player, and Amy was a singer. So we didn't have a drummer, we didn't have a bass player. We almost never played out live.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's me here, Michael Franti, and welcome to this week's episode of the Stay Human podcast. As always, we want to say thank you to Gibson Guitars for sponsoring the show, and Epiphone Guitars. They're doing amazing stuff these days. And we really appreciate all of your comments and feedback, so keep them coming. And I'm excited because our guest today is a multi-platinum Grammy and BMI award-winning songwriter and producer who's a founding member of one of my favorite groups of all time, Evanescence, and has been writing hits with and for renowned artists for over 2 decades. He's one of the most sought-after multi-genre songwriters in the world, with releases by Keith Urban, 5 Seconds of Summer, Blink-182, Weezer, Dan and Shay, Avril Lavigne, Kelly Clarkson, Jason Mraz, Christina Perri, another one of my favorite artists, Ben Rector, and a young guy who might have some possibility to do something in the world, this guy, Ed Sheeran. And so please welcome to the show today, Dave Hodges. Dave, how you doing?
Doing well, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
David, man, God, you've worked with so many incredible artists and been involved in so many groundbreaking records, you know, and I'm just curious, where does this come from? Like, who are you? Where did you start? What was your family like? Did you grow up in a musical house?
Yeah, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, going to church 5 times a week. That was a really big part of the world that I grew up in. And I loved it. Like in the 2000s, as American Idol was a really big thing, you would hear story after story of people saying, the way I fell in love with music was singing at church or hearing the choir at church or whatever. I love that there is baked into the American tradition, this like music starts in the church for so many different people. And so I was always singing in choir doing that.
I was the same way. My mom played organ in the church, and I was the tallest guy in the church, you know, from my age. And so that meant I stood in the back of the choir.
Right.
And so I learned to lip sync. My mom would be like, "You're not singing loud enough." So I'd just be back there kind of mouthing the words and like trying to talk to the guys in the back of the row with me, you know. So lip sync, it's also a good thing to become a pop star. You got to have that training early too.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that. That's great. Yeah.
But I fell in love with music. You know, my church that I went to was a Lutheran church. The music was pretty boring. You know, it wasn't like Holy Roller Baptist, you know, drums and all that stuff. It was organ and voices. But what I felt was like this surrounding thing of like, when one person sang, it was all right. But when everyone sung together, it was like, whoa, you know, and you'd hear people who were singing harmonies, not just in the choir, but some random person in the row behind you is like picking a third, and another person picking a fifth, and people are just going, you know. And I found that thing of like melody. So tell me what it was like for you being in church, and what was your experience?
I think that is a unique setting, like you're saying, that you would have people not just singing the main melody of a thing, but you're right, you would be surrounded by people engaging in art in a way they're bringing something new to it. I remember my dad, I was always bored sitting in church, and when the music would come up, it was a Baptist church, and so we'd have the hymnal and the whole thing laid out there for us, right? Turn to page 261, and we're going to sing this first and second stanza of this thing. And my dad would be like, all right, I'll sing the bass, you sing the tenor. I wasn't even that stoked about it at the time, but it was like a challenge to like, I'm reading the part as it goes, as the sound is resonating inside of me and resonating in this auditorium of 1,000 people, whatever. It was a really immersive experience to feel all of that happening. And you didn't have to be in a symphony or have any kind of special training to be able to do it. You just got to kind of grow up around it. Both my mom and my dad, my mom was an all-American flautist in high school. And my dad was an all-state trumpet player. So they both had definitely an acumen for music. And it was a thing that existed in our house growing up. And so me and my brother and sister, we all took piano lessons. As a rule, to live in the Hodges house, you had to take piano lessons until the 9th grade. And I really hated it. I didn't like any part of it. And it's funny looking back on it that when I was in middle school, I didn't particularly gravitate towards music. I didn't really particularly gravitate towards anything. My friends were playing basketball and I just wanted to do what my friends were doing. So the music thing didn't seem like that important to me. The moment that I could stop taking piano lessons in the 9th grade, I did. And about 6 months went by. And I remember sitting in science class one day, and this melody popped into my head. I was like, man, what is that song? And the more I listened, the more it kind of circled around in my head. I was like, oh, that doesn't exist yet. And I was like, I wonder what this could be. And so I get out of school that day. I get home. I remember throwing my backpack down, going to this. My mom had been given this beautiful 1918 Steinway baby grand from my grandfather. So that was the piano that I played on for 7 or 8 years as a kid. Beautiful piano. And I sat down at that piano and I knew the instrument enough to kind of voice out what I was hearing in science class. And 3 or 4 hours later, I had written my first song. And that was the thing that got me. It wasn't necessarily music in general, or like you were saying, being connected with a community of other people that were making something greater than the sum of its parts. Over time, I see the beauty in all of those pieces of it, but it really was creation that really got me. The fact that a thing didn't exist, and then I put the effort in and poured my experience and my artistry into a thing, and now something exists on the other side. That was the drug that had me hooked. And the next day I came home from school and I wrote a song. And the next day I came home from school and I wrote another song. And the next day, I truly, from 15 years old on, I haven't really looked back. That really, really got me. That was such a revelatory thing. My dad and I laugh about how when I was in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, over the weekends, we'd go to this like science museum, or we'd go to this Air Force base and look at airplanes, or we'd check this thing or that thing out. And at the time, I didn't really think much about it. But looking back on it, my dad was like, I just knew that you needed something to focus your interest on, because you would get too bored with all the things that were in front of you. And if you didn't have something to be really focused on, then you would just end up wasting your time, or, bashing in mailboxes and smoking weed, or whatever the high school kid that doesn't have direction would do. But truly, and then the moment that I started writing songs, he was like, okay, cool. He's found his thing. And that really put me on my journey. So
when you first started writing songs, well, first of all, I just want to touch on what you said, because it is an amazing feeling as an artist of any kind of art, that you have an idea. It just comes through you from somewhere, who knows, in the universe, and part of it touches you, and then you add your flavor, you flesh it out, it becomes something, you stew over it, you find some things by chance, and then someone sings it into the world, or you sing it into the world for the first time, and now there's this thing that just was never there before, and that is so cool. What was the things that you were writing about at that time?
Nothing of value. It was, I think, so early on in the creative process, we are emulating people that we look up to. I'd grown up listening to a lot of Christian music. And so I think a lot of it was focused in that kind of direction. In high school, I really loved Sting, but his capacity as a writer and his chords and melodies were well above my pay grade. But I was always kind of reaching in that direction for it. I could only play piano, and I was a good piano player, but definitely not a great one. But I found real limitation in what that was. When I went to college, I picked up an acoustic guitar, and I loved just the versatility of, I'm not a great guitar player even to this day, but enough to where it's like, oh, I can build a piece of art. I can tell a story here, or I can tell a story here. And it gives me more ways to move around it. But yeah, they were probably, I think in high school, it was just probably cheesy love songs, because that's the stuff that I heard and was kind of aiming towards.
So you're writing love songs, and was school like a thing for you? Did you feel like school was something you enjoyed, or did you just hate school? Or
I feel like not until college did I ever feel like it took much effort. So I think I kind of floated by. I wasn't a straight A student, but I floated by with A's and B's. But I really was so focused. I mean, the moment that I was focused on music, that really did take up my attention. We had chapel once a week at school, and I would use that chapel time to lead worship music there, but then also play songs that I had written there. I remember trying to convince the principal of the school. It was a really strict Baptist school, and convincing the principal, hey, I wrote this song last week. I'd love to play it for chapel this week. And she's like, what's it about? And it was just like a love song. And I was like, oh, it's about my grandmother who passed away. And I'm kind of singing like a prayer to her. Like I'm just trying to finagle my way just to be able to perform these songs. Cause like the feedback from an audience is so, especially when you're not collaborating as a writer. When it was just me writing by myself, I couldn't tell if it was good until I could get some kind of response. So I just loved the feeling of that dynamic. So to me, school was just a function of being able to continue to do my music. Really, music was such a primary focus for me from 15 on with that. So
how did your music evolve once you got into college?
The college that I went to in Oklahoma had a pretty robust music department. And so there was a lot of options of musical things to be done at the school. I still wasn't in a place of like starting a band or collaborating with other people on recordings or on writing. And to me, that's the real catalyst of how you start to grow as an artist. So I still was by myself in my dorm room writing my songs. I had more venues to play those songs out, but it wasn't really until dropping out of college and joining Ben and Amy with Evanescence that I started to really see, I think, a whole new dimension of what songwriting could be, what artistry could be, because it needed that collaborative experience, I think, for me to start to play off of other people and go, oh, wow, your story and my story, the Venn diagram of that, there's all this space in the middle that we can really build off of and tell stories from. So that's when I think it really started to change.
How did you meet Ben and Amy?
I played a show in Little Rock. I opened up for this band that was coming through town and just sat there with my acoustic guitar and played 3 or 4 songs. And a guy came up to me afterwards and said, hey, I'm a music manager and I think you're really great and I would love to be your manager. And I was like, well, I don't know what any of that stuff means. And I don't really know who you are. And I don't know what a music manager in Little Rock, Arkansas is supposed to be or do. But he said, I've got this other band and the guitar player for the band has like an 8-track. And I'd love to introduce you guys and maybe he could help you record some of your stuff. And so 3 or 4 days later, I went to Ben Moody's house and met him for the first time. And it's funny looking back on it. I was this college kid wearing my cargo shorts and Birkenstocks. And he shows up at the door in the middle of the summer wearing all black, very fitting with the Evanescence kind of theme. But we hit it off in Little Rock, Arkansas. Exactly right. And we just hit it off right away. I think because for both of us, it was like the first person we had ever met that was actually really serious about making music. We both had a modicum of talent, but I think beyond that, it's like we actually really gave a shit. It really mattered to us, and we were going to work hard to perfect the thing that we were doing. Everyone else we knew in Little Rock maybe had a garage band or a thing that they kind of played around with, but they weren't intentional about it like both of us were.
What was Ben's musical experience? Is he an instrumentalist, vocalist first, or what?
It was guitar for him, and he loved world building. I really think, I mean, it's Amy's poetry and her voice that makes Evanescence, but it also was Ben's. He just knew what the band was before it was a band. Like he knew the font and the colors and the soundscapes of it and the tone and the energy. Like he really had such a grand scheme of it all. And I look back at that season of time with Ben and Amy, and it's interesting how like Amy liked artists like Bjork and Tori Amos, and Ben loved Metallica and Typo Negative, and I came from more of like a singer-songwriter tradition, and I loved the angst and the energy and the emotion of the music that we were making, but I didn't really grow up around rock music in the same ways that Ben did. And so all of us, I think, were coming to this art from different directions. And it was this small little piece in the middle. If we could create a piece of art that Amy really loved and resonated with, and that Ben really dug and thought fit the brand of Evanescence, and that I felt inspired by through the progression of the song, of the melodies and of the story, it was a very small window that all three of us could create something that we all three liked. And I think that's part of what was special about that band is like, we spent 3 years and we worked, especially once we got signed, about a year into it, we got signed with Wind Up Records, and we spent all of our time making music. And we ended up writing, I think, only 20 songs, maybe less than 20 songs, but we were always kind of retooling and reworking and re-editing and reimagining the stuff as it was going, which was such a unique kind of, now that I've been a collaborator and a songwriter for almost 20 years, I've never had a collaborative experience like that since. It was a really weird way that we came to it, but I think we didn't know any better, and it was really exciting for us because every day we're building this bigger story. So,
you know, it's great to hear the backstory behind it, because I remember the first time seeing an Evanescence video on MTV, you know, and hearing this beautiful piano and then this beautiful, like you said, like Tori Amos style, you know, really beautiful singing of Amy. And then all of a sudden, wake me up, you know, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? I was digging it. And then it's like, by the end of the whole thing, it's like, oh yeah, that's really different, but it makes sense, you know? And so to hear how it all came together is really cool. And now, you know, people look back at those records and they go, oh, that's the Evanescence sound, you know? And you guys are just like 3 random people who came together and like, man, I kind of dig this and you kind of dig that. Tell me about just that process of collaboration and how it's grown for you and what it means to you. You know, like right now you have a record that's coming out with Ed Sheeran's got a record that's dropping today that you worked on. What's it like when you approach an artist and you go into a room and you go, hey, let's write something?
Yeah, I love that question. One piece of the Evanescence experience that was unique, that we thought was a really detriment to us, but looking back on it, maybe was super helpful, is I was a piano player. So all that piano stuff and the string arrangement stuff on the record, that was my specifically like in the studio musical contribution. We were all writing the music together, but Ben was a guitar player and Amy was a singer. So we didn't have a drummer. We didn't have a bass player. We almost never played out live because none of us had any money. So like we didn't want a guy who owned a bass to now be a member of the band and have a voice in the stuff that we were writing and everything. And we couldn't hire someone because we didn't have any money to do that. So we never got feedback from a crowd. We didn't build a fan base and go, oh, they love these songs or they don't love these songs. So we made all of our music essentially in a vacuum. I remember part of the reason we signed to Wind Up Records, so the label that we signed with, that label was out of New York. And the first band that Wind Up Records had was Creed. And they sold 30 million albums. And so all of a sudden, Wind Up Records has all of this money, all this capital to use to invest. And so they were signing all these different bands. They heard our music through the grapevine and offered us a record deal. And it wasn't a great deal because your first record deal never really is. But then a couple of other labels, some majors, started to have some interest. But we knew we would have to play a showcase if we were going to sign with one of these majors. And Wind Up had already given us a deal, and not a great deal, but a deal on the table without ever seeing us play live. And truth be told, we would have done all right. But Amy was maybe 18 or 19 years old at the time. And she was real nervous about like, well, what if we play a show, which is not really our strong suit? And then they think, oh, you guys really aren't that special at all. And then we would be the band from Arkansas that could have been, but never was. So we always wished that we had the ability to play live shows. But I think because we didn't play live shows, we did create a unique kind of sound, kind of on accident, which is kind of a wild thing to look back at, because now with my job, a lot of the job is hearing what's on the radio, hearing what's in the marketplace, seeing other things that are happening around. And as an artist walks into my studio, part of my job is to think like, what is special about them, but how does that integrate into modern music, which I think is a smart way to look at it, but also can be confining, can be a detriment. So part of my job is to figure out, now, when do I turn that mechanism on in my brain to go, is this a chorus that you could hear on the radio? And when do I go, we're making art today, and its value is found in the sake that the artist resonates with it. To me, that's the real pitch that I give to people who intern at the studio with me, or people that I've worked with at my publishing company, is when you write with an artist, big or small, you have decided to dedicate your time and talent to work with them that day. So whether they're the biggest artist, whether it's Ed Sheeran walking in the room or some baby artist that has never written a song with anyone else before, I am going to give the exact same amount of effort to them, because I'm honoring myself in the process. I'm honoring my own time and talent, but I'm also honoring their time and talent they've chosen to share with me. And if we can make a piece of art that they love, if I can be a real companion with them on that journey, that to me has proved the most successful, because I know that the A&R people have opinions about stuff. I know that their manager has an opinion about how things should be. I know that there's a timeline for a new album to come out, and there's a marketing department, and there's a this and there's a that, and this is what's cool and what's happening at radio now. And again, those things are worth considering. But for the first time I'm in the room with an artist, I want them to know that my primary concern is that we make a piece of art that you love. And if I can do that, even if it's something that the label's like, this artist keeps on trying to write these types of songs and that's not right for their project and we can't cut these songs, even if that's the case, I still have proven to the artist that they are my main priority. I'm not working for the suits. I'm not working for Warner Brothers. I'm working for you today. I'm with you in this journey today. And then we'll have another session. And if we have another session, then maybe over time we can start to have conversations about, hey, they say that we need an up-tempo song. How do we do that in a way that doesn't feel like you're losing a sense of your artistry or whatever? Trying to do all that stuff on the first day, you definitely can scare people away in the process. So if I can really be a companion with that artist in the journey, and I think coming from a band kind of helps my brain automatically think like that. No one could have walked in and written an Evanescence song with us. It was our music. It was our thing. And so I really honor, if an artist lets me into their process, I know how sacred that space is. And I really want to like show up for them, not just to give them a hit song, but to help them write a great song for them.
Something that's them, that they can feel like this is me expressing who I am to the world. And
yeah.
If I go on stage and sing it for a bunch of people, I don't feel like I'm singing someone else's song, but it's like, it's come from my heart and my voice.
No doubt. And that's also why like most of what I do is writing with artists. I lived in LA for about 15 years and I live in Nashville now. And a lot of the Nashville tradition is we are the songwriters. You are the artists that are going to sing it on stage. Let us be great at our job and present to you a great piece of art that you can now go sing. And I get it. I get why the tradition has been that way. But to me, there's always an artist in the room, even if there isn't an artist in the room. It's someone's story that we're telling. And we're trying to make this story accessible to as many people as possible. But it's still someone's specific vantage point that we're writing about, that we're putting the meat around to flesh it out. And so I would much rather be in the room with an artist, even if they're not like a pro songwriter or whatever. I'm at least they're engaged in the process of making the art feel like theirs. It's practically helpful because you get more cuts that way, but it's also artistically helpful, I think, because it just allows me to know, not only does this melody sound great with your voice, but I saw your eyes light up when we put that second line of the second verse in, because that's your shit. That's your story. That's your life. And I know an audience loves that too. It seems counterintuitive, but the more specifics that you put into a song, the more the audience, I don't know, it resonates with it. When Ed Sheeran sings Castle on the Hill, I actually went up to his house and we went to that castle and we sat outside and I was like, oh, the song makes so much more sense to me now that I see the castle here. And I see that's that rock that you threw up behind the first time you drank vodka. That's where you kissed a girl for the first time over there. Like, but all the specifics, I didn't even need to see it to still love that song listening to it, because I have my own version of it. It was a 7-Eleven in West Little Rock instead of an old castle, but still, like, it is, we put our experiences in those details. And so I love being with an artist to help find those details that really resonate with them.
You came from a unique experience in music. You know, when we talk about artists, you hear a lot of people who are like, yeah, you know, I grinded and I came up with this and I collaborated. We had 5 different bands in high school. We changed the name 20 times and that didn't work out. And I sang at a bar, you know, it's like, and you came from this experience where, you know, the kind of the first time you collaborated with some other people, you wrote hit songs and you created something that was so unique and so singular that what was it like when you left that and went out into the world, after having all the success? And now it's like, oh, I'm going to go, what am I going to do next? And I walk into this room maybe to write with somebody who I don't know before. And is this going to work? And did you have that feeling of like uncertainty after having had gone from just writing songs by yourself to now being one of the biggest bands in the world? And
yeah, I often say like there were two great gifts that I feel like were given to me in my career. The biggest gift was at 15 years old, I wrote a song, a shitty song, sitting at my parents' piano, but it was the spark that gave me focus. And truly everything I have done from 15 to 42 now, I knew where I was moving. I knew what I was going toward. And man, so many people spend so much of their life just spending so much effort trying to find whatever that thing is. So the fact that I knew what the thing was at 15, man, what a gift that is. The second gift I really do think is, and this sounds maybe in some ways obvious, but the early success of Evanescence made me dumb enough to believe my instincts. Like it made me foolish enough to go like, hey, if I like it, maybe that matters. Like maybe that's the only thing that matters. I remember right after Evanescence, there was a lot of interest of people writing with me and Ben. Amy was really focused on continuing the journey for Evanescence, for the band. For Ben and I, we were off exploring new adventures. And I was very often the youngest writer in the room, which in some ways is nice because you don't feel like you have much. There's not a ton of expectation on the youngest writer in the room. I just have to like be inspiring. I've got to be passionate, but I don't have to be really great at it because usually the older guys or women in the room, they're the ones who have done it a long time and know what they're doing. So I felt like I had a little bit of pressure off of me, but I found that, I don't know, trusting my instincts worked for Evanescence. The very first writing session I did for anyone else, it was with Kelly Clarkson, and it was Ben and I that wrote with Kelly for her second album, which ended up being that breakaway album, ended up, I don't know, selling 12 million copies worldwide. It was a massive, massive record. And we wrote this ballad, Because of You, with her for that album that I look back on and I see, again, it's so specific to her story. As a craftsman, as a songwriter, I probably wouldn't have said it in a lot of the ways that we said it in that song. But part of those rough edges of it is where I think the listener goes, oh, that's real for Kelly. Like it's not everything smoothed over and everything rhymes where it's supposed to. And then her delivery performance, she's such an amazing singer that it was such
unbelievable performance on that.
Yeah, and the ride that I got to go on with that. So it's from Evanescence, and then Because of You, which ended up being the BMI Song of the Year in 2005. So it was like the most played song on radio in America that year. And I think I really did look at Ben after we won the BMI award, and I was like, maybe this job is easy. I don't know. Like these seem to have fallen in our laps. And then after that, then it got really hard, which is funny to see the journey of it. But those two things set in my brain this sense of work with the people that you're excited by and believe that if it matters to you, that it will matter to other people. So I have a lot of friends who grew up and trained their brains to almost do the opposite. Work with the thing that's exciting, make sure to get in with this A&R guy and know what's the next thing coming up. Change the style of music that you make to what is happening at the time. Chase things that are on the radio right now. And I do think people can have real success with that. I know guys who are just incredibly smart and are really good doing that. That feel really tiring to me. For me, it's a lot more fun to say, I don't know what's going on with this artist, but I think she's fucking cool. And so we're going to write a bunch of songs together that we like, and maybe those will go somewhere. And like almost every other songwriter I know, 90% of the things that I work on fail miserably. So it's not like I'm always right about it, but I fortunately enough have been right enough times that I can continue to double down on this idea of like, hey, if that's something that feels intuitively right to you to do, then keep running with it. And so now that list you said at the beginning, it kind of shocks me too. It's like, wow, to go from Carrie Underwood to, I actually was working on a Carrie Underwood record and an Avril Lavigne record at the same time. I'm making a rock record with my buddy Emerson Hart. And it was so fun to me because it's like, oh, we can just dance in all of these places. And it uses different you have different vantage points of how you see art and create art, whether it's pop music or country music or rock. But I love that about it. I love that we can kind of play around in that space. So that intuition, I think I got lucky falling into it, but I think it has served me well over time.
You know, when I think of a lot of the records that you've made, the piano stands out so much. And there's always these really emotional chords and emotional melodies, you know, whether it's Christina Perri or whether it's, like I said, with Kelly Clarkson. I mean, just the intros to those records are so stunningly beautiful. And yet at the same time, a lot of the songs have a lot of this like angst or anger or pain or something that's really dark. And I think of something that, you know, Scott Storch, he was the piano guy and producer who worked with Dr. Dre a lot. And he said that, you know, Dr. Dre would always try to find the nastiest bass line he could just come up with and then put the prettiest melody on top. And that's like his thing, you know, that's like, you know, his constant that goes throughout his music. When you write, is there a constant? I mean, I hear it in the piano. I don't necessarily hear it in the genre of music or the artists that you work with, but is there something that always is like a way that you find it or a feeling that you're trying to get at, or is there an approach that is the same? Is there a through line for you, or is it just different every time?
That's interesting. What I am craving as a lover of music and also as a collaborator with the artists that I work with, what I crave the most is authenticity. But that authenticity can take a bunch of different forms. He would always make me blush when he said this, but as Ed and I would write together, he's like, man, I feel like this section needs just like one of those Hodges melodies. And you probably know this as well. I don't know what my sauce is. I don't know, like all your friends around you can know, oh, that's Michael's thing right there. That's his signature thing that pops out there. And I don't really, as the genesis of it, I don't really know what that thing is. To me, it just sounds cool or good. But there are, I think, certain go-to things that we probably gravitate toward. And I have always loved piano stuff that feels melodic. Nothing I've ever played on piano is really that hard. I've never like loved solos or moments where it's like showing off chops. I have a real respect for it. I mean, as we were talking about David Ryan Harris earlier, like I love the guys who can do that. I've never had a skill set for it. And I also haven't had much of a drive for it either. There's something to me about like, and maybe this is growing up in a church where trying to create a piece of art that everyone in the congregation can sing along with. That's, I think, the thing that I'm aiming for. I was telling a buddy the other day, to hear a song that you wrote on the radio is an amazing feeling. To walk on stage and be handed a trophy for your art is an amazing feeling. But far better than both of those is to be sitting in a club, in a theater, in an arena, and for the artist on stage to hold out the microphone for that third chorus and to hear everyone in that 80 cap room or in that 15,000 cap arena to sing along to your song. Oof, man, that is the magic of that. It can't be qualified to anything else. So maybe I'm always trying to think of melodies or something that just anyone could connect to and could sing along with. Yeah.
I love that. I think about that too. When I'm writing, I'm always thinking, is this lyrically deep enough that there could be multiple meanings for it? But is it simple enough that, yeah, you can hold the microphone up and anybody can sing it drunk with their best friend? Like, that's what I was thinking this too. Like, I'll put my arm around you and, oh, we're singing this song, you know, we're a little bit fucked up and we're all singing out of tune, but it sounds great. And then the other thing for me is like the driving test. I'll put the record on when I'm done and I'll put it on the speakers and I'll just imagine I'm in my car. I got like a bottle of fucking Old English 800 between my legs and a joint in my mouth, and I'm driving and I go, okay, yeah, this sounds good. Like I'm really,
yeah, no doubt.
It sounds like I'm on Highway 1 in California and just going down the road.
I love too that music is a different art form than just about anything else. I mean, maybe culinary arts are similar in this regard, but that music becomes infused with our story. When I read a book, I'm reading a book. I'm not doing anything else. I'm reading a book. When I'm watching a movie, I am engrossed in this media experience. When I'm listening to music, I'm sitting by the pool with my friends. I'm driving down the PCH. I'm shopping at the grocery store. Like it weaves itself into our stories. And I think that's why there's a nostalgia connected to our art that's different than the nostalgia connected to other mediums like that. Because the music I listened to in high school isn't a thing that I did when I wasn't doing other things. It is part of what I was doing for everything. And man, what a beautiful thing that is. I think that's great.
You know, I think about the way that music has evolved in the last 10, 15 years. There's two things that strike me. Number one is that people don't buy CDs. People don't put a record on and play an album from start to finish in their car. And now with Spotify, the songs are so much shorter. I mean, like if you write a 3-minute song, it's like, whoa, God, that took forever, and songs are like, 2 minutes, 20, 2:28, because Spotify, you want people to listen to the song over and over again. And so people write shorter songs so that there can be more time in the day to listen to their music. And then the final thing that I think is really actually a kind of a cool thing is that people listen to music in headphones more than they ever had before. And there's a quality to the songs that you've written that for me make them be great headphone songs. So one of them is the piano, and then the other one is just like the depth of the lyrics and the fact that those songs can be sung in a whisper or they can be, screamed out loud as the song grows, but they can start as a whisper to draw you in. And that's what I love. One of the things I love about the direction of music today is that there's less instrumentation, the voice is bigger, and I think it has a lot to do with people wearing headphones. It's like too much information. If there's hi-hats all the time, it's like you can't hear the voice, you can't hear the song. Do you think about those kinds of things at all, or is just the way that you develop your songs when you write?
That's really smart, thinking about the process of how people are listening is changing the art form itself. The length of songs, I think, that one kind of jumps out at us at songwriters, but I never thought about the intimacy of the headphones. I think that's really cool. I've been on this kick lately. Maybe other businesses work this way. One thing I love about the music industry is, for the most part, we collaborate with such a wide range of socioeconomics in our job. Like, I feel like a guy who makes $100,000 a year working at this office, like all of his buddies make about the same amount of money and they drive the same kind of cars and they live in the same kind of neighborhood. And none of that's bad. Like, whatever, live your life. But every musician I know has like a couple of friends who are millionaires and a couple of friends who aren't going to pay rent this month and a couple of friends who spend 200 days a year on the road touring. And the diversity of all of that space, I think, helps us be better artists, better storytellers, because we have all this diversity of story that's hitting us along the way. I've just had conversations with a handful of younger artists and writers recently where they feel really like they're not getting ahead. The art that they're making isn't really being heard. And it's been really helpful to me to remember art and song and storytelling is almost as old as humanity. It's been with us for a long, long time. And only until the last, less than 100 years, has an artist, for the most part, been able to create art that is celebrated while they're alive and that they're able to monetize while they're still alive. The idea that you are someone who makes art that matters and you see the fruits of that with success or critical acclaim or with money while you're still on this earth, while you're still alive, is such a rare thing in the span of how long we've been telling stories, how long music has been part of our human experience, that I try to let that stuff go. So I see that you're right. There are trends that are happening now in the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, of songs are shorter. And I will say, when I'm writing with people, I remember in the early days, in the early 2000s, the label would be like, if your song is more than 4 minutes long, you're going to have to cut it because radio won't play a song more than 4 minutes long. And it is so hard. And I remember at that time being like, man, it's really hard to make sure it's under 4 minutes. We're going to have to cut the intro in half, whatever. And now it's so hard to write a song that's longer than 3.5 minutes, 3:15 or whatever. So I think all of us are being affected by our environment, that we hear 2 minute songs, 2-minute 15 songs, and it does start to change the way we do tell stories. But I don't know, maybe it's my age. I love the hour-long musical journey. I love the album. I love what the album does for us. And I've actually here in my studio this last year, kind of through COVID, a handful of friends of mine and I have made a point to listening to albums again. Actually, the one that got me was Phoebe Bridgers put out an album called Punisher last year. And a friend of mine was like, you should listen to this record, but like, you should really listen to it. And so one night we had some drinks and opened up a bottle of red, and we turned the lights down low and we cranked the speakers up and we listened to the album from top to bottom. And I'm like in tears halfway through, seeing how this song connects to that song and the sonics of how the journey that it takes. We just did it last week with Coldplay's new record, which is a real album listening experience. That is so romantic to me that it probably doesn't serve my interest as a songwriter trying to earn a living. But again, I've kind of been dumb enough from the beginning to go, maybe just trust your instincts and lean into the process of it. And if you love albums, help artists create albums. So I don't know if it'll come back in the ways that it was such a big thing in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But I have such a love for that style of the experience that, and I will say this too, man, I think so many artists get in a room with songwriters and producers, and the songwriters and producers are so focused on writing their first single. And that's not a bad thing at all. The artist needs to have a great song to come out of the gates with to really promote to be able to put a whole album behind. But that can be a really tiring thing, I think, for a creative person, when everybody that they work with is always just aiming for what's the big, loud, exciting, sexy, whatever thing. I love track 7. I know track 7 doesn't pay me very well, but man, I love what that does for the rest of the album. And I feel so fortunate to be able to work with artists like Ed Sheeran, where track 7 actually will pay you a little bit of money. Like you really can be part of a broader thing. And he has enough eyeballs on the art that he makes that those things could actually be monetized well. But either way, man, I love albums. I love the journey that you can take with it.
Yeah. It's really, a luxury in this time when we can sit back and just enjoy music for the sake of it, and you were just talking about that during COVID. And, we think of a lot of times as art as being something that's extra in life. But then when it gets down to it, like when people are in their greatest pain, they're most worried about the state of the world, they're worried about their personal health, they're worried like the jobs are stopping. And what do they turn to? Music. They put their records on, and it's the thing, that and booze, of course, or other things. Sex is another one, but music and art, it's like when people think of it in society, it's like, oh, it's this extra thing that we do. We're cutting the art program at school. But then when it comes down to it, movies, it's an art, Netflix and Spotify, they became the thing that like helped people get through the super, super dark and challenging time of uncertainty in the world that we've never experienced before, with the pandemic. Do you have, I've got two questions for you, and this is a leading up to the last one, but do you have a mission? Like, do you have you come from this experience of, growing up in church, and that's something that really informed how you fell in love with music. And then you've started working with all these different artists who each in their own right have their own missions of what they want to do. But do you have a mission is there some way that your music is of service?
This may not be true completely across the board, but the vast majority of people I've worked with, I think we would say I make art primarily for me. The first reason why I write a song, why I create a piece of art, is because, in my estimation, if we are created in the image of the divine, and the divine is divine because of creation, we as creators are fulfilling our calling just to create. And I know that there's maybe some charged language in that principle of it. I don't feel obliged to that connecting to any specific spiritual tradition. I just think that if we were made by the divine in whatever way that was, creation imbues us with a sense of purpose just in and of itself. And I think that this place feels like it's about suffering and confusion. And there are beautiful moments of transcendence, of happiness, of joy. But the baseline of a lot of what this place is for us is a lot of confusion and a pretty heavy dose of suffering. And I make art so I can get through that suffering and confusion. Secondarily, if the thing that feels like it's healing me can heal you, then man, what a gift that is. So I feel like my first mission or purpose is that when somebody walks into this room and we write a song together, that they can trust that I'm helping them make their art, because making their art, whether it sits on a hard drive on a computer forever or it finds its way flipping around the world, like that song 1,000 Years that Christina Perri and I wrote in my basement, and I never thought it would turn into anything more than just a song that we loved, and ended up changing a lot of people's lives. Every summer I get like a dozen videos from random friends saying, "Hey man, I was at my buddy's wedding and the bride walked down the aisle to this song that you and Christina wrote." Wow, that's amazing. If I was aiming for that, I would never get it. But because I think we were true to the purpose of the thing that we were doing, which is like, we're trying to ease our own suffering in this place by making a piece of art that speaks towards that longing and also speaks towards something beautiful. Honestly, that's all I need to do. For it to extend out beyond the two of us or the three of us or the four of us in the room making the art, that all just feels like gravy to me. But it isn't really the thing I aim for. The thing I aim for is like, I really want every artist to walk away and go, man, that guy really gave a shit about me and about my art. And that is evidenced by the fact that he was really engaged and really brought his best craft to it and was really inspired and open to try new things and whatever comes along with that. I think that's my real mission.
Wow. I feel you, man. That's how that's why I write music, is that it heals me. It's like I put whatever's in my heart, whatever's either bringing me great elation or great pain, and I talk about it through poetry and through music and through melody. And then when I sing it, it's like I feel better. It's like I feel like, oh wow, I got that out, and I gave voice to this emotion. And then when I sing it for other people and I see that it touches them, I go, wow, they're part of this now. They get it. Like they felt this thing that I was feeling, and I thought I was the only person in the world that felt that way. And that's what brings me back to this like greater sense of humanity. Like I'm part of this whole that's bigger than myself. And so that's my final question for you is, what does it mean to you to be human, and how do you stay human? How do you hold on to it?
I love that sense of belonging that art gives us. I think that's really profound. To stay human, I've spent the last 6 or 7 years of my life really deconstructing a lot of the notions that I had really built my identity around growing up. Christian tradition being a big part of that, but a lot of different things that I'd grown up living in the American South or moving to LA or all of that stuff. I really had a version of what I thought the world was or who I was supposed to be. And one piece that I really left out, I think, was just the importance of honesty to myself. Not in a sense of like I was deceitful to get my way in circumstances of the past. Not that. It's more like if I have an emotion or an experience I need to be honest with what that thing is, or why am I feeling that way? Or why is this relationship that I have with this person, why are they interacting the way that they are? I think that's why I do love that we in the developed world have the stigma of going to therapy seems like it's really going away. And what a beautiful thing that we can have an honesty to say like, hey, I've got most of my stuff together, but I'm a little fucked up here and there, and I'm figuring it out. Where I really do think our parents and grandparents' generations, I don't know if they were even afforded the luxury of it. I think in some ways we are evolving, but they had to go across the Atlantic and save the world. There were some things that they had to deal with that fortunately, because of what they did, we have more space and luxury to dig inside ourselves and find more nuance in that space. And I have found such joy in the ability of being honest with myself and with my experience and with the journey of others, to say that it doesn't always make sense in the moment. It doesn't always have clean, clear lines. That things can be a lot grayer and a lot fuzzier than we thought they were. But I think there's the humanity in us being honest with ourselves has a benefit that we get today and that we continue to get tomorrow. And I love trying to stay in that place of honesty throughout.
Awesome. I could talk to you for hours and hours, and thank you for joining us today on the podcast. It's just great for me to be able to talk to someone who made so much music that I love, and to be involved in so many records that have really just touched me. I remember, as a funny little funny side note to this whole thing, I went and saw Christina Perri and saw her play live, and it was a small venue. She was doing one of the holiday Christmas show things that I was on, and I went backstage and I was like, I'd love to like remix one of your songs, and I know it's just piano bit and your voice kind of, but I'd love to put a beat on it. And I told her that, and then I went back to the car and I was listening to the song on the way home, and I go, I can't make this song any better. Like, me adding a beat to this is not going to like help anybody get into this song anymore. And so I was just like, that's yeah. Anyway, that was a really funny thing. So
that's wild. Well, man, I appreciate, as you're saying, creating your art is creating this sense of belonging and purpose. I feel like that's what you're doing with this podcast as well. So, man, I appreciate the effort of leaning into that. Angie and I were talking earlier. I love that we're in this era now where what beautiful conversations now can be encapsulated for generations later to touch on and go, oh, these were the stories that they were telling at that time. These are the thing that they were going through. I think that's awesome. I'm so grateful to be a part of it. So
awesome. Well, everybody go and just do a deep dive. Just Google David Hodges and listen to all the songs that he's been a part of, from Evanescence through all the great artists he's worked with. And you won't go wrong. Believe me, there's such a world of music out there in so many genres. And I'm excited to see what you do next. So keep up the awesome work. I hope I'm one of those artists you get to work with.
Dude, I love it.
I would love to work with you and
that would be great.
Spend an afternoon making some magic. So on behalf of Gibson Guitars, we want to say, everybody who's listening out there, thank you so much for tuning into this really great version of the Stay Human podcast. And we'll see you next week. Peace.